easy.
Okay. So a little bit more about me and sort of my background. I started as a developer here at Agility, and we also used to have our own custom services team. So we used to also build websites for our customers on our platform. We had a whole team there, developers and project managers. So I was the former head of that department. So I know a lot about building solutions on Agility. For those of you who don't know, we had a pretty big change in the company about a year and a half ago now, where we actually sold off that division of our company so that we can solely focus on the product. The reason why we wanted to do this is because the product really is our bread and butter, and we have something that's really evolved over the years and is very competitive in the market in terms of features and how powerful it is. So we wanted to go 100% heads down on our product and share that with the world. We know how great Agility is by using it for years, but now I'm really excited to share that with all of you. So I encourage you to ask me about anything, anything from development to architecture, training, getting onboarded. If you're in the manager or you're working with Agility, you have an idea of how you can make it better, please let me know. I also have quite a bit of experience in Azure as well. So if you're, trying to figure out your own cloud stuff, I can certainly help with that too. Feel free to contact me by email or social media. I got Facebook and LinkedIn, and the links are all here in the slides. One tip here is that during this presentation, there's going to be several areas where we're going to be inputting code, like code samples. So all of the code samples and everything that we're going through is in the slide deck that I'm working through. So I would recommend take a moment right now to go to this URL in your browser, open this up so that you have a copy of the same slides that I'm working on. That way, when we get to the part when we're sort of copy and pasting some code snippets, you don't have to sort of manually type that in. You can just go directly to the slides, copy it, paste it directly into your Visual Studio or where it's going to go. So take a moment now, open that up. I tried to make the URL small so that you can manually type it in and it won't make any mistakes. So I'll give you guys a minute to do that now. Can you do me a favor? Actually, can you turn, using that light switch there, can you turn down the light behind me a bit?
I'm having technical difficulties at the moment. I'm gonna have to do it afterwards.
Okay. I'm casting a shadow of myself here, trying to see if we make that light a little bit lower, if that might fix it. Yeah, that's actually better. That's better. Okay. Yeah. People can actually see me now. Good. So follow along in the labs if you can. If you are having technical difficulties or you're not able to follow along exactly, that's fine too. You can just sort of sit back and watch, and I'll try to share as much detail as I can as we go through this. We will have a couple 15-minute breaks, just because, like I said, we're going to cover a lot of different things here, so I don't want you guys to get too burnt out or tired. Probably also need to take a bio break at some point too. As I mentioned, all of the stuff that I'm going over here is included in these slides, so you can work through these on your own pace as well, or share these with other colleagues after the fact. And of course, if you're working through this and you have a question or you're not quite able to follow along, please just ask for help. We have people here on site that can help you out. And if you're here on site, for remote folks as well, just just speak up and we'll try to help you out. All right, cool. So the first thing we're going to do here is we're going to just talk a little bit about Agility as if you don't know what it is. We're going to go through building a blog, and then we'll talk a little bit about how to deploy things. We'll even go through the process of actually deploying our updates. So at the end, we should have built a blog, or albeit a very basic blog, into our sandbox. Okay, so first off, Agility. Agility is a true cloud, multi-tenant, cloud-hosted CMS. We are also what you could consider to be a hybrid CMS. We say hybrid because traditionally we are headless. We've always had a headless model. Our CMS is entirely decoupled from the presentation layer. So we don't force you to build your website a certain way. It doesn't have to fit a bunch of templates. You're always free to implement whatever kind of front end you have on that end. So in that aspect, we are headless. But it also, we do have some sort of traditional CMS features in our platform, and that's things like page management. We also have an SDK that gets installed in the .NET MVC project that takes care of a whole bunch of work for you, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. So headless, but all the traditional features you might expect from a more traditional CMS solution. There are many different ways to work with content in our system. We can use the .NET MVC project, for example, or you can use REST APIs to be able to get content in and out of the system. Mm. I want to touch again on True Cloud. We are True Cloud because we are a multi-tenant application, which means that we have one version of our content manager that all of our customers use. So when we make updates, all of our customers get updates. We manage the platform, the database, and all the content, so you don't have to worry about backups, redundancy, nothing like that. That's all handled by us. So don't need to maintain any versioning. That is all done for you. So you can be rest assured your Agility instance will be fast, clean, and won't get messed up. Well, now I'm having technical difficulties. I just lost my screen here. Hold on a sec. All right. I think I'm back in business here. Okay, sorry about that. I'm going to just play you guys a quick little video, which is going to actually give you an overview of our architecture. So I'm just going to play the architecture. So I'm just going to play this right now. Oh. Can you guys hear this audio that's playing in the video right now?
No.
No, I can't either, James.
Jeez. All right, one moment here. Sorry about this.
It's okay.
Pause. Frustrating. Okay. Frustrating. Okay. Okay, well, you guys can hear me, right? You can hear me speak right now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to forget that video. Don't worry about it. I'll explain it. So what's great about Agility's architecture here is that you actually have Agility, which is up in the cloud, and your website can be hosted wherever you like. So it follows that headless model. When you publish content in the CMS, content actually gets synchronized directly to your web servers. So what that means is your web servers actually have a copy of all the content that you have from your CMS. So that means at any given time, you could actually stop using Agility or disconnect your syncing web server from Agility entirely, or, albeit if, a data center blows up and Agility is offline, your website's going to remain up because it has a copy of all the content that it has. So we manage how content gets synchronized directly to your site. If your site's unavailable, we'll keep you trying until that sync goes through. This has lots of benefits. One, I just mentioned in terms of the architecture having that decoupled benefit. But the second one being is performance. You will no longer have a bottleneck on hitting a database or calling a third-party API. You'll never have a dependency on a slow resource because it's all contained on your file system. So before I continue on there, that is a very sort of fresh concept. So are there any specific questions around sort of that concept? I'll talk a little bit more about it in more detail as we go through this workshop, but the idea of syncing content, is there any questions around that right now? Okay, I'll take silence as a good sign. So let's move on a little bit here. Let's talk about web content management and how Agility handles that. How you manage content, especially web content. So number one, you build your schema in the cloud. So this means that you can sort of create any type of fields that you like. Every instance is entirely bespoke. So it's not like you log into an instance and you have all these existing fields that you need to sort of manipulate or hack to try to get the way you want it to work. Everything is built from the ground up. And you'll see that in our sandbox. Those are just examples of some content schemas that we put in there. We put in a concept of products and a few other small things, just basic stuff. But the important thing to keep in mind is that your content structure, where you define your CMS, is entirely up to you. So every instance will look, vastly different, and no one's sort of forced into using things a certain way. So you define the pages, the templates, the modules, the content, and then you output the code using your sort of favorite front-end framework of choice. So, in this particular workshop, we'll be talking a lot about how this works in a .NET MVC project, but keep in mind as well, there are other ways to use our CMS. So how does Agility and .NET MVC work together? Let's talk about that a little bit. It's pretty straightforward. Agility uses an MVC pattern. So if you have a website, you'll have an MVC structure which will look something similar to this. You've got your controllers, you've got your view models, your views, web config, basic stuff. There's also a agility.web NuGet package that gets installed as a dependency. This is what facilitates the communication and the syncing between your website and the content management system. There's also an Agility Website Service SVC, and this is the endpoint that we actually use for synchronizing content. And you're always able to customize your routing. So agility.web takes care of a lot of page routing stuff for you, but you can always customize this. You can also integrate Agility into any .NET MVC site. It doesn't have to be a brand new one. If you have an existing one that you just wanted to try Agility out for a little bit, maybe use Agility. My screen is flickering again. Okay, there we go. Oh, let's just lose the dock for now. All right. Moving on. So a page template in agility is what is going to actually output different things. So in agility is what is going to actually output different things. So whether one column or two column template, that's what corresponds to a razor partial view. Your module output, so the individual components of a page, that corresponds to a controller action result or razor partial view. And agility provides auto-generated C# API classes representing your content and module definitions. That is a big mouthful. That last part, don't worry about it too much. We're going to talk about it a little bit more as we go. So agility.web is that piece that gets installed in your MVC site. It's the core assembly of the Agility SDK. There's a dependency on MVC. It handles all the syncing, and it's available on NuGet. It also does a whole lot of other things, such as page routing in your application, page template execution, module execution, content access and deserialization, URL redirections, output caching, preview mode, development mode, live mode, language content, channel management, and lots more. The idea here is that agility.web does a lot of things for you, so you don't have to do that in your application, and you can focus solely on just building functionality into your website. Now, when a page request comes in, so let's say you're making a request to an About Us page, it's going to actually go to your route config in your MVC application. It'll match the agility route constraint that we have in there. And then agility.web will then render the page template and execute the code for each module. And we'll see this happen in action later on in this workshop. And then lastly, it renders the whole body and serves the whole HTML. So it sort of fits into that .NET page rendering lifecycle quite well. And I think I actually missed a section here I wanted to talk about. Yeah, sorry about that. So let's now go into agility and look at the manager. So we've been talking a little bit about code and how that stuff works. So let's actually look at the manager to get some context here. So I'm going to log into agility. I'm actually going to log into my sandbox. This is the same sandbox that that you guys have access to. Just a moment here. All right. So hold on one moment, guys. I'm just going to fix one thing in-house here just for the folks that are in All right, we're back. Sorry about that, folks. Okay, so what we're looking at here is the Agility Content Manager. This is the sandbox. I'm going to give you an overview of the CMS, so I'll give you a bit more context here and what we're talking about. So right here, you'll see this is the main dashboard of the CMS. These sandboxes aren't hooked up to a Google Analytics account, but if they were, you'd be able to see all the analytics data right here within the instance, which is quite helpful. Then you've got the different sections here. So Agility is comprised of several sort of core components. The one we're going to be talking about in this workshop is specifically web content management. So that includes things like pages, shared content, and media and documents. But as you can see, there's also some other things we have here too. There's things like user content and website users. This is part of our user-generated content component. So whereas web content management is for things that you are publishing out, whether that might be your website, an app, digital signage, whatever the case may be. User content and website users is stuff that comes in from the website. So that's content that's being created by users that are actually using your website. So let's take a look at pages. You'll see here in pages of your sandbox, you've got a handful of pages that are sort of already set up for you. Again, every Agility instance you log into will look vastly different. There might be 1,000 pages, there might be a lot more. There might be some nested pages. It all sort of depends on the structure of the website. Now, if we click on the home page here, this is going to load our page details. So this just tells us the details of our home page. So this is all great, but it helps to see what the front end of this actually looks like. So I'm going to hit preview in the top here. And when you hit preview, it's going to actually load your website in a preview mode so you can see the latest content. It might be a little slow loading at first just because these sandboxes, the application needs to start up when you make the first request. But once it loads, it should be pretty quick. Sweet. So what we're looking at here, this is a super basic vanilla developer sandbox. I'm not trying to wow you with this front end. I know it's a little underwhelming. The purpose of this is that we can focus on the core features of how to get and access content. In terms of the front end and making things look nice, that's always entirely up to you. We don't dictate how that happens. You can use any framework you'd like. It's your website code at the end of the day. So in Agility here, since we are looking at our homepage, you can see we have sort of a couple things in this page. We have a header along the top. We've got this thing at the top here that looks like we've got a header, a Jumbotron. And then down here, there's a sort of list of featured items. And so that it represents what we have here. And I can move these around as well. So let's say I want to have one over the other. I can make a change here. So let's put the featured content right at the top. And let's change the name of the title. What is that not looking for? My sandboxes doesn't want to get into preview, but I'll make it. There we go. So you can see here, I'm going to go back to the home page. You'll see that my menu text in the header has now changed. So now it says home the second. And you'll also see that the order of my modules have changed too. So it represents what I actually have on my home page. So again, I can move this back here, make a change. And then I can just go back here and refresh. And so now I have the sort of module at the top in the other order now. And then you can click into these modules, which are the sort of individual pieces of content we see there, and we can start making other changes. So you can start making other content changes here. Save. Go back to your home page and refresh. Yay. So we know that content is being updated. That's great. And we can also exit preview mode. You can see at the top here that we're only viewing staging content. So we're viewing the latest content. Now, all those changes that I've made here, I haven't actually published the change. So you can see this page is currently in staging. So my menu text is showing menu the second. Here it's showing the second. Now, if I exit this, I'm going to view the live version of the site, which is what I was seeing before. And when I view the live version of the site, you'll see that none of those changes that I made have been published, so I'm seeing the original version still. And at any given time, I can go to history, and this will show you the version history of this content item for this page. So my last version here was actually one that I haven't changed since 2015. So that's a published version of that page.
Is there a limit on how much history?
Good question. So the question, in case you guys didn't hear, was: is there a limit to how much versions of that you can have?
Yes.
No, there is no limit. There will come a time where the amount of content items in your database will grow. You know, we have customers that have been on our platform for many years and have done many sort of front end revisions of the site, but kept the same backend. So they get more and more versions, more and more content. So what we do at that point is we just sort of add additional resources to the database, or we'll go through an archival process with the customer so that they can sort of, if for old stuff that they really don't need ever again anymore, we can sort of permanently remove that from the system. But usually you don't have to do that unless you've got, we're talking like millions of content items. Yeah. So just lost my train of thought there. Oh, yeah, so we looking at modules. If you're looking at a page here as well, the page has properties. So the SEO tab, you can see here all the properties for SEO fields. So for pages, you have things like meta description, meta keywords, additional header markup, all that fun stuff. You've got settings tabs where you can change the type of template you're using. So what we're looking at right now so far is just like a 1-column template, and that's something that when we build the site, we defined. It's entirely up to you what kind of templates you want to have. If you want to have a 2-column, 3-column, 5-column template, you can do that. Really, it's just defining what content zones editors can put content into, because you might have a page template where you're pulling in dynamic data from some other thing, and you only want editors to be able to modify a sidebar in there, so you can set that up. There's also a scripts tab. So this is an area on pages where you can add in JavaScript. I would say use this sparingly. You don't want to be putting in functional JavaScript in here, like something to power an image slider, for example. That stuff should be just work out of the box in your website code. This is mainly for things like marketing has to add a tracking pixel, or maybe they need to add a special Google Analytics script just for this one page. This is really what it's meant for. It's meant for editors to be able to drop in those sort of scripts that they might need to add on specific pages.
Can you put Razor code in there too?
You can, but it'll expect that it's JavaScript, so you can put whatever you want in here. But yeah, it's mainly just JavaScript. Yeah. Good question though. And then there's scheduling. So you can enable scheduling on any piece of content. So regardless of whether it's a page or something in shared content or a module, you can enable scheduling. And so when you enable scheduling, you can set a release date. So when content is going to be released and available to the website or your other services, and you can set a pull date. A pull date means the content will no longer be available. What's great about this is that on pages, you can also optionally set a redirect URL. So this means that, after the thing should be pulled, as opposed to just showing a 404 page, you can redirect the user to somewhere perhaps more friendly. That was a feature requested many times by some of our customers, because you don't just want to have people go to a dead page. We also have things like alerts and security that you can apply to all things in the CMS, regardless of whether it's a page, module, or content item. Alerts are for workflow actions. So if an editor wants to be notified that something has been published, they can subscribe and get an alert. You can also set up workflow and editor roles so that perhaps an editor doesn't have the ability to publish, but when they do click publish, a manager will get an automated email and then be able to go and approve or go ahead and publish that item on their own. So you can implement content workflows. And then for security, this allows you to sort of lock people down. So you might allow someone to manage everything on the site, but this one page they can't. Or vice versa, they can't do anything else on the site, but on one page they can do something. So that's what you would use this for. Then other sections in the site here, we've got things like shared content, which is a sort of bucket of where you're going to put content that is, not specific to a page or a certain area. It's sort of something that's global and may be used across multiple pages. So when you're thinking of things like articles, products, news, tickets, anything that has structured content like that, where you might see it referenced on different pages, whether it's a listing, the details, a snippet, or a featured thing, that should be stored in shared content. That's where you sort of configure all of that data. So for example, if we're looking at products here, you'll see products, we have a list of structured content. So if I open up one of these, you'll see that there's some fields for this, and all of these fields are completely customizable. You can add any type of field you want to any sort of content item. So in this case, we have a title, we have a category, which actually links to another list of product categories. So you can select an item from here that exists in that list of product categories. And then here we've also implemented some tabs, so we can organize the fields in a easy to use fashion, where we can set a price, a summary, details. And these are just a sort of a basic WYSIWYG editor you can use here. So these fields are entirely up to you. In the images tab, you can see we've got a listing and a main image. Again, totally customizable. Then we have media and documents. Media and documents is an area in Agility where you can place all of your static content. And when I say static content, I mean like sort of static assets. So typically that's images, PNGs, GIFs, etc., or GIFs, depending on how you say it. Sometimes you'll see, you can even put HTML files in here if you really wanted to. Sometimes you might need to do something quick. PDFs, Word docs, etc. And then going further down here, we've got settings. This is sort of where, if you're a developer, you'll be spending a lot of your time in terms of site configuration and getting everything going. Couple of sections here that I will highlight. There's one here for global configuration, which just has a few things and some default email addresses that get used in your instance. There's global security. This is where you would go to retrieve your security key, and this is used for authentication. You can also configure password policies. So if your customer has a policy where their passwords can't expire or need to be more complex than others, you can set that up here, and that's specific to this instance. There are also a couple sections here that we will be spending some time in our workshop when we're creating some new modules. So through this, we're going to be creating a blog. So we're going to be creating new content schemas. And this is where we're going to be doing it. We're going to be creating new module definitions and new content definitions. Modules, if you remember, are essentially the things you can add to a page. So if I want to add a new module to my home page, I can add a rich text area. So I'll just say this little hello world. Save and close, and now I can preview the home page again. Preview the product page. Then so now I can see my little text added right at the bottom says hello world. So today, as we're going to be going through creating the blog, we're going to be creating and defining our new modules. So when we hit plus, we'll have some new modules that we'll be able to add to pages that will interact with our blogs that we're going to create. What you see here, this list of modules, Agility has a few built-in ones that come in every instance and just sort of work out of the box. That is the form builder and the rich text area, but everything else you see here would be custom for each instance. The idea is you define a module, what fields you want to collect, and then that corresponds to corresponding code that gets executed. And we'll walk you through that. You can sort of copy different module definitions from instance to instance. So if you had a couple different instances and you use the same modules, you can do that too. You don't have to always start from scratch. So just to recap here, I just want to reinforce the sort of concept of what's in a page and how that sort of gets pieced together. A page consists of a page template. A page template consists of content zones. You can have one or many content zones. And those content zones, you add modules. So using this sort of structure, you're pretty much able to accomplish anything you need to create for a page. And something that has maybe a very complex layout where maybe you don't want to have a whole bunch of different content zones, you can always just have one content zone and then have your module just have that complex layout directly in place. It's entirely up to you and how you want to build it. So for your example here, if we're looking at this page, you can see here that there's sort of this is the page template. Then we've got a content zone on the left, just with some rich text. And then on the right, there's another content zone, again, just with some rich text. And so there's a module there and a module there. Before I move on to this section, does anyone have any questions in terms of how pages are structured in Agility?
Are you able to add a class or ID to a module?
Yeah, so when you actually implement the code for the module, you can you can put whatever type of HTML classes. That's entirely up to you. It really doesn't have our CMS won't enforce anything around that, and you'll see that when we go through the following example. All right, so I think I've done enough talking here. So let's actually start going to our tutorial of actually creating a blog, and we'll actually get into doing some code stuff. So now that we understand some basic concepts of the CMS, we're going to build a simple blog template that's going to list some posts, and we're going to add a module that's going to output the post details. So we'll have a list of posts, click on that, open up the details of the post. Sounds pretty straightforward. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a specific page template for our blog post. So what we're going to do, we are going to create a new page template definition called blog template, and it's going to have a single content zone. Why a single content zone? Well, because our blog isn't going to have a sidebar. It's just going to have just one area where the content is just top to bottom. So we only need one content zone for that. We are then going to add the code for the page template output so that when it's rendered in our website, the corresponding HTML gets outputted. Then we're going to create a page that uses our new page template. And then lastly, we'll verify the results. So to get started here, we're going to go into the Content Manager. We're going to go to Settings, Page Templates, and we're going to click New to create a new page template. So I'm going to go to, in the sandbox, I'm going to go to Settings, Page Templates, New Page Template, and I'm going to give this a name. So we're just going to call this Blog Template. Under digital channel type, you're going to select website. You'll see that there's some other options here. Don't worry about those. Just select website. And then under output type, this is where we can specify what code in our website code gets executed when this page template is rendered. So for this, we're going to enter a specific path. Now this code file doesn't exist yet, but we're going to create it immediately after. So I'll put in ~views, and let's give it a path templates. And then under templates, just call this blog template.cshtml. So now we're instructing Agility. It says, hey, when this template gets rendered, execute this code. It's creating that mapping for us. And then down here, we can create module zones. Again, module zones, content zones, same thing. We're going to create a new one here, and we're just going to call this main content zone because this is just one area where we're going to add modules. So we can call this main content zone. And you'll see here there's ability to add default modules. We're going to leave this empty for our case, but it's cool to know that you can set up templates with predefined modules already attached to them. That way, as a developer, if you know your marketing team is going to be creating the same sort of pages over and over and over again, rather than making them create a blank page, add all the modules individually, you could actually set up copies of templates that just have those modules already scaffolded on the page template, and all they need to do is just click on the module, type in the content, publish it, and they're good to go. But for our case, we'll just leave it empty. So we'll hit save and close when we're done that. So now we have our new blog template. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to create a brand new page, and we are going to choose the blog template to render it. So I'm going to click new here, and then the top here, when you say add a new page, I'm going to select the blog template. And I'm just going to call this page blog. And so you'll see here we have a main content zone with nothing on it. So now let's do a test. Let's see if we can get this to display something for us. We'll just add a simple rich text area. And I'll just generate some lorem ipsum here. You can put whatever you'd like in here. I'm just putting this here for test purposes. Well, Grammarly really doesn't like lorem ipsum. So I'll hit save and close on this. Now, remember I have this site that's already deployed. What do you think is going to happen when I try to navigate to this new page that I just created with this page template that we haven't actually created any code for yet? Ali, if you had to guess, what do you think is going to happen?
Well, if it's pointing to a page on our site, then the site is going to try to handle that unavailable page.
Yeah, so I can navigate to the page on my deployed web server here. But you'll see I'm going to get an error. So I get an error because the code hasn't been deployed to the web server. So the question is, how do we get the corresponding code for that template up? So to do that, we're going to run the site locally. We're going to add the code And then later on in the lab, we'll actually deploy that. But for now, we're just going to run the site locally, and we're going to do these development changes in our own environment. So to do that, you're going to, I sent everyone an email today along with the Sandbox credentials. There is a link in there for the website source code. If you haven't already downloaded that, click that button or link, and it should give you a zip file. I'll show you what that looks like. And we're going to go ahead and open that in Visual Studio. So once you open the file, it should look something like this. So open up the S folder, and then open up MVC for a sample site, and then navigate directly to the solution. So I'll give you guys a moment to catch up and open this up. If you get a security warning saying you should only open these projects from a trustworthy source, like I do, you can trust me. All right, if you're able to open it up, you should see something like this. Are you guys able to open it?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Lauren, are you able to follow along on this along with this as well? How are you doing?
I've got it pulled up.
All right, so while we're just waiting a little bit here, I'll talk a little bit about the structure here. For those of you that are familiar with MVC, this really shouldn't look too much out of the ordinary. You should feel sort of right at home. If you're curious to see sort of, how Agility gets its claws into the MVC site, take a look at the global.asax. And you'll see here that there is, when we register the routes, just like a standard MVC site, if we look at our route config, you'll see here that there's actually a built-in route that you just need to add there. So this will instruct the MVC routing engine to attempt to render every page that comes in here. This sample site is entirely controlled by Agility. Every request that comes in the site, it attempts to route it to an Agility page. If it doesn't find an Agility page, it'll just fall through and eventually, 404. But what's great about this is that you can easily add Agility to any other MVC site that you have and be able to still have your own routes. And if you wanted to have your own static route and never have Agility try to render that, you would just place that right before the built-in route that we have here. Okay, so now that we've got that out of the way, how are you guys doing? Are you guys able to open it?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So before we do anything first, let's just make sure that we can actually run the site. So to run the site, we're going to hit debug, start without debugging. You can debug if you'd like, but I think it's a bit faster to do start without debugging. It may take a moment to restore some NuGet packages, but it should start just right up for you. You shouldn't have to do anything else. So it'll take a bit of a moment here. And actually what it's doing in the background, and I can show you, is it's actually downloading the data that it needs to run the site locally. So if I go to Agility content on my C drive, you'll actually see that there's a folder being created for my sandbox, which is, what's my sandbox name? There it is. So in a staging folder here, you can actually see it's building up the file. So it's actually, my homepage is rendering, it's actually downloading a copy of the data that it needs for everything. This is how the site works when you're previewing it or when you're running it locally. It'll pull down content automatically, so you're always working on the latest content. So when you make a change in the CMS, the next time you make a page request locally or in preview mode, it'll pull down that latest content for you. And at any given time, you can just go and delete these as well. Agility will just regenerate them the next time you make a request. When your site is running in live mode, it never calls home. It's actually pushed to you. This is more of a pull. So yeah, running the site for the first time may take a moment. But there we go. And you can see here, remember that rich text area that I added on the homepage? I can see it here in my local environment as well. So now this is mimicking what we have currently deployed. So I'm going to wait a few moments to make sure everyone's able to run that locally.
On the solution score. Were you able to open up the solution file?
Yeah.
Oh.
Okay. Yeah, there's a comment here for you remote folks. It may ask you to download MVC4, which I'm sorry about. I should update the sandbox to be MVC5. It's perfectly compatible. I just haven't done it yet. Hey, Lauren, were you able to open up the solution and get it running?
Yep, I've got it running locally.
Nice, sweet. Did it ask you to install MVC4, or did you already have that installed?
It did ask me, yeah.
And you're able to go through that? Okay, cool. Yeah, we have it's one person here that's just catching up, so I'm just gonna give it a few more moments. Not to put any pressure on you.
Looks like it's running.
So it's just loading like.
Cool. So what we're gonna do next, and if you're in the slides, if you actually just keep sort of scrolling down to where we were, so if you go back up to this section here where it says lab, create a new page template, you just use your arrow keys and scroll down. And keep going. This is just going over the steps that we've already done. But you'll see here that there's some code. So this is what we're gonna copy. Copy that to your clipboard because we're gonna create a file in our VS Code, sorry, Visual Studio, and paste that in there. So copy that to clipboard. You can just hit that button there and make it real easy. Go into Visual Studio. Now we're gonna create that template file that our blog template is gonna be looking for. So if you remember the path that you placed, now if you set it to something other than what I set it to, you'll have to remember what you placed. You may have to go back and reference what it is in the CMS. But you're going to expand the templates folder here, and you're going to create a new file. So you add, view, and we're going to call this blog template. And we're going to create it as a partial view. So now you should have a file that's just sort of open and empty. That's in the directory of whatever you specified in Agility. So in my case, that was under views, templates, blog template. And again, if you need to go back to check where it is, you can go to settings, page templates, and find the template that you created. And then just double check and look at the path that you have here. And once you have that code, you can also just copy paste that directly in there. And I'll make this a bit bigger. There we go. So what you should have at the end here is just some real basic code here. We have a little bit of a style. Typically, you would not have inline styles like this, but just for illustration purposes, we just put it in one file to make it real easy. And this is just going to make the margin of our blog template a little bit thinner. So it's not super wide. It keeps the user sort of focused on the content that's sort of in the middle of the page. So again, if you need to get the code that's from this, the best place to grab it from is from the slides right here. All right. So once you have that in place, now we're on our local machine. We're going to go back to, you can just refresh the application. And now if you go to that blog page that we had created that uses this template, we should no longer get an error if we did everything right. So now let's open up the blog page and let's see what we see. Nice, that's pretty much exactly what we wanted to see there. We can see that we have our one column template displaying a rich text area, and it's contained a little bit. It's not quite as wide as the sort of regular container is, and it's sort of contained about 700 pixels or so. So now at this point, if we actually wanted to make this change live, all we need to do at this time is deploy the new version of our website code to our production server or UAT server. And then in Agility as well, after that's done, we would just go find our blog page and publish it. I'm not going to publish it yet because, well, we don't have the code that's actually in production. And it's also not done. This isn't a very good blog yet, so we're gonna make this better. Are you guys able to render that?
I got it.
Yeah, check for typos. What is the accent? Blog template. So it's looking for views / blog template. So what do you have in Visual Studio?
I don't have that, so I think I can. Oh.
No, yeah, that's very close. Yeah.
No, but you have
I
template
did
slash
start-
blog. So you just wanted this.
I did start going down this path.
Oh, so you changed? Yeah, you
Yeah,
changed
I
the
did choose this.
name of it.
Yeah.
That's not so. What you'll do? Go to the C drive. Go to Agility content. So like go to like push open
Oh, okay.
File Explorer.
Yeah.
So what's happened here is that the template hasn't updated the page. So go to C drive. Agility content. So that. And then again.
That is.
It's only one hour when you go. But it should work. All right. Lauren, were you able to get that working on your end?
Yep, I've got it working.
Nice. All right, cool. I think we've all got it working here too. So now let's actually create a module. So what we're going to do in this little section, and then after this we'll take a bit of a break. We're going to create a new module called blog post details, and the role of this module is going to accept some structured content in terms of title, image, description, and then we're going to enter that content, and then we're going to add some code that's going to sort of output a formatted blog post for us. So we're going to call this our blog post details module. We're also going to download and refresh the C# API. I haven't shown you that yet, so we'll go through that. And then we're going to add the code for our module to actually output the HTML. And then we'll add that to our test page and actually see if it works. So following along here, you're going to want to go to settings, because when you're creating new schemas and things, you always go to settings. And you're going to click on module definitions. Module definitions, this shows you all of the existing modules that are configured in our instance. So again, you want to go to settings, module definitions, and see this list. And now I want to click the plus sign for new. I want to create a new one. Now, give this a title of blog post details. And there could be spaces in it. Actually, I would recommend putting in spaces. It's a friendly name. And then description. The description field is actually really important because when editors add modules to pages, it shows you the title of the module plus a little bit of a description. So it's helpful to add a usable description here. So let's call this, this will display the details of a blog post. That way, when editors add it to a page, they have an idea of what it's supposed to do. Of course, they can always preview it and see what it actually is anyways, but it'll save them some time. Next, you'll go to Form Builder. Why is there's like a little red mark on my screen here.
Yeah.
There we go. All right. So Form Builder, this is where we're going to define the fields for our module. And so we're going to add 3 fields here. We're going to add a title field because every blog's got to have a title. We're going to add a details field, which is just going to be a WYSIWYG area, similar to just like a rich text area. And then we're going to have an image because at the very least, a blog post is probably going to have a listing image. So in reality, your blog posts are probably going to have a lot more fields, but let's just try to keep it simple for here. You might have categories, you might have other associated fields. We're not going to worry about that at this time. So we're going to add a new field, and we're going to call this title. And under the field label, that's what gets displayed within the input form for the editor. We put the name in title. The field name, that's our sort of reference name. You can just leave that. It is auto-generated. Description. This allows you to provide a description for the field so that when the editors are inputting it, you can provide some additional context around that. So for example, we could put in this is the title for the blog post. You could enter that. Now under field type here, you'll see there's a drop-down menu. But there's only one option. It's text. That's because the name, the field name title, is a reserved name. When it's title, it can only be text. That's not the case for anything else. Its title is just a special case. And you can also do things like mark it as required or set default values. So we're going to mark this one as required because, again, every blog post should have a title. Next, we can hit Save and New. So this is going to apply that new field to our form, and now we want to add another one. So the next field we'll add our details field, which, as I mentioned, is going to be a WYSIWYG area. So we're going to say details, and we'll just leave the description blank. That's fine. Under field type, here's where we get our full list of available field types. So we've got text, long text, HTML, date time, number with decimal, true, false, drop-down list, image gallery, attachment list, other file type, URL, link content, and YouTube video. These are all the built-in fields that Agility provides out of the box. You'll also notice that there's another tab up here for custom field. So we allow you to create any type of custom field you'd like. And we're not going to cover that too much in this workshop because that's a little bit more advanced. But the idea is using HTML, JavaScript, and CSS, you can register your own fields and render them within the input form. So that enables tons of capabilities. We have lots of developers that develop integration with third parties, pull data from other sources, show them as a drop-down list, all that sort of stuff. So pretty much, if you can think it, you can do it. But for this case, we're just going to use the built-in fields. So we're going to select HTML field, and we're going to mark that as well as required. So now hit save and new to apply that field and get another one. And we're going to call this one image, and this is going to be an image field. So under field type, you're going to select image. You'll also note that there's another field here called image gallery. That's if you want a collection of images. For this post, just a single image field will do. You'll also see that in terms of other data we have here, also mark the image as required. But we have different validation options we can set on images. This is so that as developers, we can enforce that editors, if they're selecting an image, has to meet the requirements of the type of image we expect it to be. So you can set a limit on file size, height, width, or specific file extensions. For this purpose, we're just going to leave them available. You can set whatever image you want. Save and close. So now you should have 3 fields in your module: title, details, and image. The last step here is to tell our module what code to execute. So just like we did for page templates, we need to instruct Agility that says, hey, when this module is rendered on a page, execute this piece of code. So go to output template, and when you see here, you'll see you have 3 options: partial view on website, MVC controller action, and inline code. Inline code actually allows you to write code that in Agility that gets synchronized to your web service. So you actually can create new modules in Agility without even having access to the source code. Some developers like this, some don't like this, because what can happen is that you end up having code that some of it is in your source code, some of it is in the cloud. We usually recommend, if you're using inline code, do everything in inline code. If you're doing everything in Visual Studio, do it all in Visual Studio. In most cases, people tend to veer away from inline code unless there's sort of a one-off situation where you have an editor or a developer that just needs to add something really quick to the site and you don't have access to the source code. That's one way to do it. So we're going to select, in this case, we are going to select MVC controller action. So this is going to execute a specific piece of C# for us, and it's going to allow us to do some logic prior to returning a partial view, which will be the HTML output. So for this, you're going to enter blog as the controller. And then for the action name, and this is important, there should be no spaces in here, you're going to enter blog post details. So it should look something like this. And now we're going to hit save and close on that to create the module. Perfect. Now, what we're going to want to do is, once you've created that module definition and it's been saved, there's a button up here that you'll see. It says download API. So what's that all about? Let me explain. Before we do that, switch back to Visual Studio. You'll actually see that there's a folder here called models. There's nothing special about this folder. It's just called models. It's usually part of your sort of scaffolded MVC code. It's nothing Agility specific here. But you'll see that there's this file. Again, this could be named wherever you want it to be. It just so happens in this website it's called this. It can be in whatever namespace you want, doesn't matter. But what is special about this file is that you'll see it's filled with strongly typed classes for all of your content schemas. So you can see here we have stuff for modules. We can also search and find, one for products. So what defines a product? So you'll have these field names that correspond to fields that have been created in the CMS. Now, you'll never have to manually generate these. This all happens automatically. So it would be a lot of work to keep those in sync yourself. So we auto-generate this file for you. So generally speaking, to work well with Agility, we've developed this strongly typed API so that you have strongly typed objects and you can have compile time error checking. For those of you that are familiar with that, it is way better than remembering what string or what field names are. Also, if you have a typo, you'll know immediately, your app won't compile. So it's much easier to work with those properties. Also takes advantage of IntelliSense, all that fun stuff. That being said, you don't have to use this. There are ways you can use Agility without using the strongly typed objects, but we would not recommend it. Trust me, this is going to save you a lot of time and frustration. So the rule of the game is that if you change anything in terms of module or content definitions, whether you're creating a new module or changing a field or anything like that, you're going to want to hit download API to get that new file and replace it in your code base. So this is the sort of manual way to do it. You can hit download API. It's going to download this file for you. You can then open that up. And you'll see here, the namespace is auto-generated based on your instance name. That's because Agility doesn't know what namespace you use in your website project. You can set that to whatever you'd like. You don't have to keep this namespace. So usually what I like to do is I just copy everything below the namespace. And everything down there. So copy that to clipboard, go back here. And just paste it in place. So now I've updated that. So I should be able to see my new module in here, which we called blog post details. So I can open that up and you'll see here, those are the properties that were auto-generated for it. And be careful when you're copy pasting in, because if you mess up the angle brackets or the curly braces, you remember to close your classes. But again, it won't compile if there's a problem, so you'll know immediately. Now, that being said, this could be a little bit cumbersome if you're making changes to fields all the time and you're constantly downloading this and putting it back in your project. So at Agility here, we realize that and have spent a lot of time developing sites ourselves to know that there must be a better way for this. So to answer your prayers, we have implemented a Visual Studio extension for Visual Studio. We are working on one as well for VS Code. We don't have one yet though. So this extension, while you probably don't have time to install it right now, I'll just give you a quick demo of it. And there is a link to it in the slides. But when you have it installed, you can right-click your project here, your file that you want to replace, and then just right-click that, hit Agility CMS, and you'll see here there's an Update Model button. Click on that. You will need to log in the first time, so I'll log in with my Agility credentials. It's going to validate my namespace. This is going to pull in the namespace that your file currently is, so you can only just leave that as OK. Hit OK, and now it has replaced my file. So now I have a new version of that. So it's a lot easier to do that directly from Visual Studio. You don't have to go back and forth from Content Manager. So if you are working in Agility quite often, I would highly recommend installing that extension. So now that we have that done, we have our models updated. Now we need to actually create the corresponding code for this. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go to controllers. We're going to add a new controller. So you want to find the controllers folder in Visual Studio. You want to right click on that. And then open up the context panel, select add, and then you're going to select controller. Click that. And then this will launch the little wizard similar to what we did for reviews. And it's going to say, okay, well, what's the controller name? This controller name needs to match the controller name that we put in Agility for the module. So the controller name, we're going to call this blog. If you named your controller something different, that has to correspond to this. And under template, just leave it as empty MVC controller. So there we go. Now we have just a empty controller. Now, if you remember, we also gave a specific action result. So that was called the blog post details controller. So now what's going to happen is when this module is added to a page, this code is going to be executed. Just to show you here. Now, the question will be, how do we access the data that's on this module? And before we go any further here, I'm just going to refresh your guys' memory a little bit here on, while we created this blog post details module, what that input form and what the data actually looks like. So I'm going to go back to pages here. I'm going to click on blog. And I'm going to remove the rich text area that I had on there, and I'm going to add that blog post details module that we had. So here it is. And so this is the module that's going to collect our data, and we need to pass this data to our code. So let's just create some sample content here. We'll just call this sample blog post, and some content there. Now let's add some more significant content. And then under image here, you can click upload. This will allow you to upload an image directly from your machine. Or you can click browse, and that'll just allow you to browse from media documents. So if you already have an asset that you've previously uploaded there, you can select it from there. Great, so now that we have our image selected, we've got the content here, let's just hit save and close on this guy. So now we've created that module. Now, going back to our Visual Studio, you'll see that we need to be able to access the content somehow for that module. Luckily, agility.web takes care of executing this action result for us, and it'll automatically pass that object of data across. So we can actually just give it the type here of module underscore. You'll probably have to add a using statement here, using MVC for sample site.models. So once you add that using statement at the top, you should be able to get IntelliSense on this. So we can do module underscore, and we can select the one that we just created, which was the blog post details.
No, I switched it.
But it's working now, right?
James, this being recorded, right?
Yes.
Thank you. Because I'm like falling behind. My Visual Studio crashed, and I have to redo the whole thing. So.
Okay, that's perfectly fine. Yeah, this will be. Don't feel bad. It'll be recorded, and you can certainly go through this on your own pace.
Awesome.
You can actually go through the slides as well. All of the stuff I'm doing here is laid out step by step in the slides.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Oh, no problem. Just want to zoom in a little bit there. Cool. So now we've got this module here. And now we can actually, you'll get a copy of the data here. Again, if I hit F12 on this guy to be able to view the definition, remember this points directly to here. So I have these properties on that object. and I can access those properties. So I could do like var, title equals module dot title, or var image equals module dot image. So those, I'm able to access those properties quite easily. So at this point, all we need to do is just pass this data on to a partial view, something that can actually render this. So we're going to type in some code here, return partial view. Again, this is just the standard MVC stuff. And we're going to pass in a string to a view template. So we'll do views /blog post details .cshtml. We haven't created this file yet, but we will in the next step. So for now, all we're doing is we're just passing this module directly to a partial view. If you don't want to type in this code, that's perfectly fine. In the slides here, under the section heading for creating a module, this covers all the steps we just did. And if you keep scrolling down, you'll see that there is the code snippet there that you can just copy. So that is on 12.13. You can just copy that to clipboard and paste that directly in your controller if you want to be quick. Yeah, exactly. It's like random content. So the next thing we'll do here is, after you've created that controller, we're going to create the partial view. So we're going to create that under views, blog post details. So under here, I'm going to create a new folder under views and call this blog. And I'm going to click add to add a new view. And we're going to call this blog post details. Create as partial view. Now we should just have a blank page. And then I'm just going to copy this code. And I'm going to paste that directly in here. Now, if you've done everything correctly, you should be able to build your project by right-clicking the project icon and clicking build. Nice. So if we missed a step, as if we didn't download the C# API again, we would get an error there immediately notifying us that we're using properties that don't exist yet. But we didn't, and it's good. So let's quickly review the code that's in the blog post details CSHTML. We'll see here we have we're notifying the type of the model. In this case, it's just our module. Again, this is one that was auto-generated for us. We didn't have to write it ourselves. And we're just outputting some very simple HTML here. We have a div with a class name. And then we're doing a bit of a null check here. We're saying, hey, if the image is not equal null, then show the image. Because what could happen is even though we mark the image as being required in the CMS right now, later on, someone could remove that validation and then the code could try to access the property of an object that doesn't exist. What happens then? You get a null reference exception. So always check your nulls. You'll also see here that there is a little bit of, there's a query string being appended to the image URL. This is called our ad hoc thumbnailing. So it's going to thumbnail that image on demand. So regardless of what size someone actually has that source image as, it'll crop it or expand it to 730 pixels wide. We can also optionally set a height here, a crop type, and a quality. We're also outputting the image label because our image fields has the ability to set it an alt text. I think we left ours blank when we created that. And then we're outputting a title as an H1. And then here we're doing .html.raw, the HTML from our WYSIWYG area, or rich text area. So everything's all good here. We're going to go back into Agility and just verify a few things. So make sure that you have a blog page. Make sure you have a module on that page, preferably with some content. In Visual Studio, make sure you build your project. And once you've built it, that'll recompile the app. So we should be able to play it. Now, if you don't rebuild it and you try to hit that page directly, you're going to get an error because you need to recompile these C# files. So now on my local host, if I refresh the blog page, and if everything worked, I should have, well, a very basic blog layout. Let's see. Nice. My Sharkless in Seattle movie poster is looking good. So we can see here we got the image that's putting at the top. And this is actually being expanded automatically to 730 pixels per my thumbnail that I set. I'm outputting an H1 here, and I'm outputting my text. So if you've done everything correctly, you should get to a similar result. And now is usually a pretty good time to take a break so we can take some time to catch up. So if you need to catch up, review the slides in section 12 for these things, and this has all the information you need to be able to go from start to finish on here. So we'll take a brief break, about 10 minutes or so. And I'm just going to help some of the folks here that are in person here at the workshop. Lauren and Nina, do you guys have any immediate questions right now?
Yeah.
Nope, not right now.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I'm good, thanks.
All right, so you've got a few minutes now to catch up if you'd like, or have a quick breather. We'll probably reconvene here in about 10 minutes or so.
Oh, that's
All right, so I'm going to start up again in a few minutes, or a few seconds, I should say. So one of the things that I'd like to highlight is that what we just built there was a really basic module that essentially just outputted a title, a heading, and an image. So it's not really the blog architecture that we're looking for right here. So, what do you think? Do you think our current architecture for our blog is scalable in terms of like what happens if we have 1,000 blog posts? I mean, the way our architecture is right now is you'd have to create a static page for each blog post, add that module to each page. And then the problem with that is that, how can you query your list of blog posts? You don't really have a list of blog posts. You just have sort of the content of a blog post sitting on a page somewhere. So while you can do that, it's not the best solution. So what we're going to do is we're going to improve upon that by actually moving blogs, a concept of a blog that has a title, description, and an image to a structured list. And that list is going to sit in shared content. Then we're going to modify our module to just sort of use the content that's sitting in shared content. So we're going to go through that practice now. So we're going to be implementing dynamic pages. This is what we're going to do. We're going to create a new content definition in Agility, and it's going to be called a blog post. It's actually going to have the same fields we've already added on our module. We're then going to initialize a list based on that definition in shared content as a dynamic page list. Then we're going to create a dynamic page in Pages. Then we're going to go into our module and essentially remove those fields we have there because they're not going to be needed anymore. They'll be redundant. And then we're going to update our blog post module code to retrieve the current dynamic item. This will all sort of make sense as I go through this. Okay, so let's create the content definition first. So back in Agility, you're going to go to Settings. You're going to click on Content Definitions. Here we go. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new content definition. It's just like creating a module definition, but the only difference is that a content definition does not have any output template. There's no code. It's just data, structured data. So we're going to hit New, and under Type, it's going to be a list. Other option is we could just create a schema for a single item, but this is going to be a list of blog posts. So we'll keep a content list, and we're going to call this blog post. And under description, we can add some text here saying this defines the blog post schema. Next, we're going to go to Form Builder. And we are going to add new fields. So we're going to call this we have title. You can mark that as required. We're going to do details, which will be HTML. And also mark that as required. And we'll add our image field. Again, these are the exact same fields that we already added for our module. We're just moving it here now. So we'll also create an image field of field type image. You can also mark that as required. Save and close. And when you're done, just hit save and close again to save that definition. So now we have our blog post definition. Great. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to initialize a list based off of that blog post definition we just created. So we're going to go to shared content. And we're going to hit the plus icon in the top left corner to create a new list. So under the type at the top here, make sure you select dynamic page list, not just content list. This is important because each one of these blog posts essentially is going to represent its own page. So we want our blog posts to have certain page level properties such as SEO, meta tags, potentially scripts. So we have setting it as a dynamic page list enables those page level settings to be associated to this content item. So make sure you have that selected, and then under content definition, select blog post. And then as the display name, set it to blog posts, plural. And we'll hit save. Now, you're going to go to Pages in Agility, and we're going to make some changes here. We are going to go back to our blog here. We can just actually remove that module. We don't need that one to be there anymore. This blog page here will ultimately become our listing page, but for now, don't worry about it. We're going to create a page underneath the blog. This is going to be our dynamic page node that's going to help us render these blog posts. So I'm going to click on a new page here. Make sure that you have the blog page selected in the page tree so that it will create it underneath. If you created it and it's in the root, no problem. You can just drag and drop it to the place where it needs to go. For page templates, select the blog template, the same one that we had created before. And under menu text here, you can just call this, what do we want to call this here? Let's call this posts dynamic. Oh, dynamic page. Sorry, make sure I almost messed that up. When you're adding a new page, make sure you're selecting dynamic page, not just a regular static page. So under page template here, select blog template, and then we have this field here called build pages from. So this is where we want to point this dynamic node to our list of blog posts. So we're going to select blog posts. Under sitemap label, here's where we'll call post dynamic. Under page path formula, this is where we can actually specify how the page will be routed. Because what's going to happen is when someone goes to blog/title of the blog post, we want that to be our URL structure. So we're going to instruct Agility to say, hey, use this field to build up the URL. So when you hit this, we can actually add the title field as part of our page path formula so that when an incoming request comes in that matches the title of a blog post, or at least the friendly version of that title, it'll get matched up and it'll find the blog post that it's trying to render. If it doesn't find it, it'll 404. And we can also leave this set for page title. So we can say we want the page title of this page to automatically, be the title of the blog post. If we had another field, another text field available, we'd be able to set it to that too. And then same thing for menu text, we can leave it as title. So make sure when you're creating the dynamic page that it looks the same as what I'm showing here. If you want a reference, you can reference, there's some screenshots in the slides as well. Cool. So when you're done, just hit save to create that. And so the end result here is you should see, and you'll notice the icon's a bit different. In your root of your page tree, you should have a page called blog, and then right underneath it, there should be another page there called post-dynamic. And that should have a different icon than your blog page. It should have an icon with, you know, a bunch of different lists or items in there. So at this time, you can just leave the module on there. You don't have to add anything there. And you'll notice that this page says this page is built from the blog post list. So it's connected to that list, and you always know that. Now you can actually click on that and it'll take you to the list of blog posts. Right now our blog posts are empty. So what we're going to do here is let's create some sample blog posts. You can either access it directly the way I did it through there by clicking on the page and then clicking on that link, or you can just go directly to shared content and click on blog posts and click on new item. So for the title here, let's just set some sample text. So I'm just going to call this sample post 1. Put in some HTML. Select an image. Save and close. And if you want, you can create a few more too. You can create them manually, or you can just check it here and actually copy. So if I want to copy that item to the same list, I can go ahead and do that. I'm just going to go in here and change the title here so it's unique. So now I've got 2 posts in here. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to go back to pages and going to demonstrate something here. I haven't added any module on here yet, so really this is just sort of like an empty page. But the Agility routing engine will know that this is a page that's to be rendered, and it knows if it matches a URL, it'll match it to that item automatically. So if I go to my local site or even my deployed site, this will work. Actually, it won't work because the page template isn't there. So do this on your local site. You can then go to blog / a friendly version of the title of a post you just created. So for example, I created one called sample post 1. So if I make a request to sample post -1, which is a friendly version, spaces are replaced with hyphens, and I do that, Agility should automatically route to the correct page. It's showing me nothing right now. That's because, remember, we haven't added a module on this dynamic page, but notice that the title of this page is sample post 1. And it didn't 404. So the Agility routing engine said, oh, hey, you want to access this page? Okay, great. It renders that sort of placeholder page that's in the page tree, but passes off a sort of dynamic context of your current page. So now my page title is sample post 1. I just don't have a module here that's actually outputting the properties of my blog post right now. So that's the next thing that we're going to do. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to actually update our previous module that we created. Remember that module we created called the blog post details? We're going to go back to that, and we're going to go to settings, and we're going to go to module definitions, and we're going to select blog post details. Under form builder, you'll see here that there's still those 3 fields there. Now we don't need those anymore. We just created a list of blog posts and put the content in there. So actually, we really don't need anything to show up here. So let's just delete all of those fields. And actually, in reality, in this specific case, we don't even need to have any fields on this module. We just need this module to execute some code for us. So we can leave that empty. Hit save and close. You'll notice here that when you make that change, there's a little bar that pops up at the top that says module unpublished. The module definition is in staging mode. Until this module definition is published, attempts to publish modules using this definition will fail. So what this means is that we just made a change to our schema. Now, if this was a live website and we just deleted a bunch of fields, you don't want your website, if you have a website that's relying on those fields being there, you don't want to introduce an application error. So we have a concept of publishing definitions. So this allows you to make changes to definitions and preview how they're going to work before you publish them. So you'll see here that block with details has a pending change. In this case, because it's a sandbox, there's really no risk here. We can just go ahead and publish the definition, no problem. But if you try to publish a page using this module, it won't let you until you mark this as safe. So while you're developing it, you may leave it in the state, and then when you're done, you publish the module definition so that that schema update is then available to your production website. So I'm just going to go ahead here and just publish that definition. There's no harm in doing that. You can do that too. And now I'm going to go back to pages, and I'm going to go back to our dynamic page, post dynamic. And under main content zone here, we're going to add our module again. So this is going to be our blog post details. This time you'll notice that there's a little message when you try to add it to the page. It says there are no fields on this defined on this item. However, you must still save it in order for its output to render on the website. So we don't have any fields on here, but let's just save and close it. Great. Now what's going to happen is that when we refresh this page, we're actually going to get an error, I believe, because we're not passing the right data now and our thing has changed. Or not, just outputs nothing. The next thing we need to do is we need to update the code that's actually using this. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back into Visual Studio. And we're going to change some code. I'm going to go back to our block controller. Remember this code? Instead of just returning the partial view, here we're not getting data anymore, right? This module actually no longer has any properties. So actually, one thing we have to do first is we have to refresh the definitions. I forgot to do that. So go back to module defs in Agility and hit download API. And then you can open that up. And again, just copy everything below the namespace. Or if you have the extension, you can just hit that button and it'll refresh. And save. Go back here. So you'll notice here that if we hit F12 on the blog post details now, it's actually empty. It has no fields anymore. So now it's updated with what we have in our content. But we also have this new blog post model, which has those fields that we just added. So now that we have that update. So on the blog controller here, we're going to make some updates. Just going to comment this out. And what you can do here is you can copy this code directly from the slides again. So if you actually go to slide 13.10 in the slides, you can just copy this directly. So that's what I'm going to do here. And I'll give you a moment to catch up. So I'll explain this code a little bit. We still have the object of the module being passed in as a parameter, but it has no field, so it's kind of useless to us. But there's this line. This is the sort of magic line to deal with dynamic pages. Here it says agility context get dynamic page item, and then we're casting it to type blog post. Again, blog post here represents this item. And this blog post is the one that has our fields of title, details, and image. So we have a check here that says, oh, if blog post is null, so if we don't get a blog post from our dynamic context, then this should 404. So we return an error here saying throw a 404 exception, no blog post matching the page path formula. Otherwise, we return a partial view and we pass the object blog post to the partial view. So similar to how we were passing the module before with the properties, now we're just passing a different object with the same fields. And if we look at our blog post details view, you'll notice here that we're seeing red squiggly lines on those now. That's because we need to make a change to our view. Our view is expecting a type of module underscore blog post details, and that's no longer the case. So we just need to make that to be models.blogpost. That's one thing to note here is that all content definitions in Agility are just named exactly what they are in the CMS, whereas modules are prefixed with module underscore whatever the name of the module is. So now that's changed. My Visual Studio still thinks it hasn't, but I promise it has. So now what you should be able to do is build the site. So hit build. And if you don't have any errors, it should build for you. Sometimes Visual Studio will tell you there's a problem with this, but there's actually not. So it's life. Now what you should be able to do is go back to your page here, which was previously empty because we didn't have a module on there. But now that we have the module on there and we've updated our code to get the dynamic item and then serve that partial view, we should be able to refresh this page and be able to see essentially the same content we had prior. Okay, so you should see something like this. So this shows the details of that blog post. And if you've created other posts with different titles, you can start directly navigating to those. So now I have another post here, I'll just update the URL, and now I'm seeing sample post 2. You guys get that figured out? It looks like you have it working. Hey, Lauren, Nina, how's it going?
Good.
Cool. Any questions so far? Okay.
Oh, is it? Yeah, it does not exist in module blog post. So you're referencing that somewhere. Go to your view for blog post details. Remove module. So it's just blog post. Okay, now it should work.
All right. All right, perfect. So now that that's done, I just want to sort of recap what we did there. So now, we took what was a static page where, a user would have to create a blog post manually, page by page. Now we have a dynamic node, which is going to handle all of our routing for us automatically. And that is linked directly to our dynamic page list in Agility, which is called blog posts. And so now we can manage all our posts in a single list. If we create and publish them, they'll be available to the site. If it's not there, it's not available. And it's just really easy now for editors to be able to log directly into the system. They just go directly to the list, add a new blog post, done. They don't have to do a series of steps like create a page, add the right module to the page, put in the data. All they have to do now is just focus on entering in content. Are there any questions on how dynamic pages work?
So on the blog page now,
Yeah.
how do we list all those blogs?
So that's the next thing. That's the next lab we're going to do. Is we're going to actually create a module that lists all of those, because you're right. It's kind of pointless to have a blog functionality to the site if you can't list them. People can't get to it. So yes, that is the next thing we're going to be doing. We're going to be creating a listing module. All right, so moving on to creating listing module now. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to create another new module definition, and we're going to call that blog listing. We're going to add code to that, which is going to essentially access the blog posts and loop through them and spit out links to them. And we're going to add this module to our listing page. So in our case so far, we have a page in a root directory called blog. Right now, there's no modules on it. We're going to add that module to that page so that someone can go directly to the blog landing page, list the blog post, they click on that, it opens up and then it takes them to the details of that page. Okay, so let's do this. Where do we go to add a new module? Settings, yeah. So we go to settings, module definitions, and click the new button. For title, you can enter, blog listing, and under description, remember that's important. We can say this lists blog posts. Now under form builder, we can add fields. So what we're going to do here is we're going to add two fields. We're going to add a title field. It's going to display on the website just to say blog posts or some sort of heading or news or whatever that might be, a title for the listing. So we're going to set that to be title, and we'll mark that as required. It will be a field type text. We'll hit save and new to create another field. Now this time we're going to create something that's called a linked content field. Linked content field allows us to sort of create a field that interacts with other content in the system. Think of it as creating like a foreign key relationship. In this case, we want to sort of link that to our list of blog posts. So we're going to call this blog posts. And under field type here, you scroll down towards the bottom. The second one from the bottom is called linked content. So select that. Now we get a few other drop downs here. So a content definition saying what definition are you trying to link to? So we're going to select blog post. Now once you select blog post, it's now going to ask us, okay, so we know that you want to link this field to a definition type of blog post, but how do you want it to, what type of list do you want to work with? New content allows you to sort of create lists of content specific to the module. So in this case, it's not what we want, but a case of where you would use that would be like, let's say you had an image slider module and you had a list of slides. You might not want to have those slides stored in shared content because they're only ever going to be used on one page. So in that case, you would define an image slider content definition that might have a title and an image. and you might have a link content list of new content, so that whenever you create an image slider and module and add that to a page, a new list gets created that holds images for those that are specific to that module only and are not stored in shared content. There's user selectable, which would allow the user to, when they create the module, and to either link to any items that, or any instances of shared content that have that same definition. Right now, we only have one, so that would be kind of redundant. But if we had different lists of blog posts that we wanted to do listings for, you could select user selectable, and then the editor can say, hey, I want to list blog posts that are blog post list 1 and blog post list 2. Maybe you have 2 different lists of blog posts. Here, we're just going to specify shared content and specifically say, hey, I want to link this directly to my blog post list. So now, it's not just the definition, but it's that specific instance that we have in shared content called blog post, where we've actually already created this, and this is the one that's hooked up to our dynamic page, so that's the one we want. Now, render type. We can render it as a link. So this means that when this module is created, there's a button that's just going to link directly to the list of blog posts. We could select that. We could also select grid, which will actually show a little sort of embedded grid of the blog post that we have. But for this case, a link is sufficient. Really, we're just trying to sort of make a connection between this list and this module and the list of things we want to display. So we'll just leave it as link. You hit save and close when you're done there. Now under output template, you're going to select, because we've already done an example of MVC controller action, this time let's select partial view on website. So you're going to type in, similar to what we did for page pass, you're going to type in /views blog listing .cshtml. So this is going to point this module to the corresponding code. Once you have that set, hit save and close to create the module. So now we have our blog listing module that's been created. Again, because we made a schema change here, you're going to want to download the API again. So we're selecting that button, we're getting the file. You'll see how having the extension, it makes this a lot easier. Again, copy everything below the namespace, copy, go back into here. Boom, done. So now we have that updated. So let's go ahead and create our listing view now. You want to go into your folder where you have views. You should already have a folder called blog. Just right click on that, hit add on the context menu, view, and name the partial view blog listing, like so. All right, so it should have just an empty view. Now you're going to want to just copy some code in here. This code is a little bit longer, so I would recommend navigating into the slides to section 15.6, and you'll see that there is this code here that you can copy. So copy that to your clipboard and paste it directly in your file. And then I'll talk a little bit about what's happening here in this code. Well, I'll actually build this first, and I'll show you the end result first, and then we'll walk through the code. So if I did everything right there, I built that. The other thing I'm going to do too is I'm going to go back on my page here, and on my blog page, I need to add that module, because right now there's no module on there, so I'm not actually using the module yet. So I'm going to click add. I'm going to select my blog listing, and we call this, let's call this news. And you'll see here that there's that link content field that's being rendered. You can ignore that right now. You don't have to set anything there. It's permanently linked directly to it. So I'll just hit save. So now I'm going to go back in my code here, and if I did this right, we should have a basic listing of the blog. And then I'll talk about the code and how that all worked. Nice. So not the nicest looking, but it works. And you'll see here that there's links directly to the post, and I can click on them, and that will take me directly to the details of that specific post. So, yay, listing. Now let's go back into Visual Studio, and let me talk a little bit about what's going on here. So there's a lot of code that's here in here for just demonstration purposes. So right here in blog listing, we're doing a few things. So the first line that we're really doing here is we're retrieving the list of blog posts from Agility. And when I say Agility, it's actually your content repository, which is already synchronized to your machine. So it's going to say, okay, var post equals model.blogpost.items. We'll see here that when a partial view gets executed by agility.web as opposed to a controller action result, it just automatically passes in the model of that specific type. So as long as you have your view specified to module underscore the name of the module, you're going to get access to the data that's part of that module. Now, this module really only has 2 fields, and we can verify that by looking at the definition. We have a title, and we also have blog posts. So here, we're calling blog post.items. So that is going to enumerate all of our blog posts for us. So that's actually going behind the scenes. It's finding the content file that has those, enumerating them, and passing them off to the application. So now you have a list of blog posts in memory. And this is a strongly typed object, so you have an enumerable list of blog posts. Now, this works because we created a link content property that actually saves the reference name of that list. So it already knows what reference name to look up, and you're able to enumerate those items. Now, this is another way you can get blog posts. There's post equals new Agility content repository of type blog posts, and you pass in the reference name of those blog posts, and then enumerate them. So if you don't know the reference name to something, or sorry, if you know the reference name of something, you can do it this way. And that's essentially how you look up data from the content repository, is you just look it up by the reference name. And to find the reference name of content, you can do that directly in Agility. Just go to Agility, find shared content. If we want to find the reference name of a blog post, we can click on that, and then click on settings, and you'll see here there's a reference name of blog post. So you can copy that, and that's how you know how that works. And now there's lots of different things you can do on this too. You don't necessarily need to just enumerate it. You can sort by IDs. Also, if you use agility.web.extensions, you can take advantage of some more specific methods like get item by ID, get by ID, or get by IDs. So this allows you to pass in a bunch of content IDs. So if you wanted to filter this list and only get certain content IDs, you can do that. Also, the .items call has several overloads. So you could say, get me all blog posts that match a certain thing. So I could say, oh, get me all blog posts where title, equals sample blog post. So if I were to do that, that would just filter my list, so I only have one item in there because I would only have one that matches that. Or it could be several if I had several that had the same title. Other properties include sort, so you can sort by a specific field. You can pass in a take parameter, so you can apply page pagination. You can pass in a skip parameter, again, for pagination. And there's also an out for total counts. So you have everything you need to be able to create pagination around larger lists. Now, this here is just a helper method to generate the dynamic URL for each item each post that we're trying to list, because these blog post items don't necessarily know the URL themselves. It's actually the dynamic page that knows the URL. So there's a little bit of a helper function here. I won't go into this in too much detail, but it essentially just figures out the right URL for each blog post and outputs that. So what we're doing here is we're outputting H1 first. So we're saying, okay, we're gonna output the title, which is news, and then we're just looping through each post. So for each P in post, render this HTML. And we have this helper method here where we're passing in essentially the path to our dynamic page, and it's going to resolve the full dynamic URL. And then lastly, we have it at html.raw, where we're actually displaying the details of the post actually inline in the listing. Any questions around that? All right, cool. So if all is good, you should now have a blog posting listing example where you've got lists and the items themselves. Just like that. Now that we've made these changes and we've sort of done what we need to do with our blog, albeit it's quite basic, but let's go through the process of actually deploying this now. So in reality, the way you deploy your website is really going to vary on where your site is hosted. You can host your website with us at Agility. We do offer hosting, or you might be hosting this yourself, or your customer might want to host it themselves too. It's entirely up to you. And obviously, depending on where it's hosted, the deployment steps will vary. But in this specific example, we're going to be using Azure App Service to deploy this. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to import a published profile to Visual Studio. That's going to allow us to sort of authenticate and publish that code base. We're going to verify the web config values, make sure that everything is set up correctly. And then we're going to deploy the website from Visual Studio directly. And then afterwards, we'll verify the deployment on our deployed web server. So let's do that now. In Visual Studio, the first thing you want to do is you want to import your published profile. So right-click on the project itself and hit Publish. And you want to, it's kind of tricky here, but hit the arrows or whatever you see. If you're on a different version of Visual Studio, look for an import profile button somewhere. Click on that. And now it's going to ask you to find a specific publishing profile. You're going to want to navigate to where you have your code. And in that S folder, the same place where you have the source code, you'll see that there is in the root there, under the S folder, there's a published settings file. You're going to want to select that. So select that, and then everything else should just figure out itself just like this. So now we've told Visual Studio all the credentials we need to be able to deploy to our app service. Now, one thing to double check is just to double check your web config. So there's a few things I want to highlight here. The web config, well, you'll probably have different transformations of this depending on what environment you're deploying to, potentially. But the few things I want to highlight here, one is this development mode. When you're running this locally, you want this development mode to equal true. this instructs agility.web to pull content and essentially not run in live mode. So caching is disabled, all that stuff. Now we have, this project contains some release configurations and staging configurations. Each one of those you'll see will actually override those, and it'll set development mode to false for you automatically. So you shouldn't have to do anything here. I'm just simply illustrating that. Make sure you have those values set correctly. You'll also notice that the staging and release profiles have a different file path for the cache. That just so happens so that Azure App Service uses a different drive letter, uses D drive, and has different path on where you can store things. Again, this will depend greatly on where you actually end up deploying your real stuff. So at this point, I think we're pretty safe to go ahead and deploy this. So let's go ahead, hit publish. Check when you have this here, I always like to check the settings portion here, just to verify that everything looks good. Click on settings. Make sure the release configuration, or the configuration for it, is set to either staging or release. I think by default it sets it to release, so you shouldn't have to do anything there. It just worked for me. And when you're ready, go ahead and hit publish. So publishing is starting now, and this is going to go ahead and deploy my code directly to production. It should just take a moment here, and then we can verify this when we're done. Done. And it is also automatically opening my sandbox for me. So there we go. I'm still in preview mode right now. So the cool thing here is that we haven't published a blog yet. So our live site, if I exit preview, still has no recollection of what a blog is. But right now I'm previewing the site, and I can test out how this is going to work before I publish it. Now if my code is deployed. So I can go navigate to blog while I'm in preview mode and just sort of further validate, yeah, okay, my changes are there. I can verify them. It looks like I'm good to publish this content now. Let's just open up the details of a blog post, make sure that works. Yep, that works. So the last step here is I'm going to exit preview mode here, and I'm just going to verify how this works before I publish it. So right now I get what I would expect. I get a 404 message because I'm doing live mode, and again, I have not published the blog page or the blog details page. So I get a 404 on both. That's fine. Now I'm going to go back into Agility here. I'm going to click on blog, going to hit publish to publish that page. And I'm also going to go and publish my dynamic page as well. There we go. Now if I go back to my live site and I refresh, you'll see here that why is my listing not there? Let's see.
Publish the shared content.
Oh yes, yeah. Thank you. I was like, wait, why is this not working? Yeah. So yeah, as someone just pointed out here, Rob was kind enough to point out that yeah, I'm not seeing a listing because I haven't published any posts yet. So let's publish these guys and publish both of those. This is where actually using batches would have been a good idea. I would have been able to set all these as part of one batch and then publish everything all at once. So now I should be able to go back to my blog, refresh, and there's my blog listing. You can also verify that my details works by clicking on those. Oh, that didn't work. Why is that? Did I not publish that definition? Let's see. There's details. Gotta love live coding.
And the actual blog post as well.
The blog posts are published, yeah.
In the shared content.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Okay, so there we go. I'm not sure what happened there. I don't know if you guys experienced the same thing or if it was just me, but I just had to remove that module and republish that one again. That's weird. I haven't seen that before. But the joys of a workshop. Are you guys seeing the same thing?
Yeah.
I saw it initially, but mine.
Just
after-
remove the blog listing module and re-add it.
You guys got the same behavior?
I'm just getting a blank white blog page with no listing.
Yeah, that was the same. That was the same thing. That was the same thing I just did. So that's weird. Well, that might be a bug in the sandbox specifically because you don't normally see that in our platform. So apologize for that. But if you are seeing that issue, yeah, try removing the module from the page and adding it again and publishing it. Let's take a look. And your posts are published? So you try removing the module from the page and adding it again.
Yeah.
Publish the actual page log.
Oh.
Because once you remove the log and add it again, the page itself doesn't actually. And it worked in preview?
Yeah.
Try going to settings, module definitions. On blog listing, publish that definition. Say publish. There's something weird on that one. Did you get the same problem or it worked for you?
Mine worked very quickly after this time.
All right, so sorry, I apologize if some of you experienced that issue, but if you did, just remove the module from the page and republish it again, and we'll have to look into why that occurred. All right, so now that we have this blog actually deployed, that sort of concludes the development portion of this. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our roadmap, and then we'll sort of we'll probably call it a day, and then we'll have some time just for some general Q&As as well. So a couple of things I want to talk about here. Number one is agility search. So we have the ability to, well, we have a new product now that can replace sort of traditional site search that Google used to use, or Bing. So it's an alternative to that. You can control how often it crawls your site, what pages get indexed. You can boost search results. Lots of stuff there. There's a JavaScript widget, so you can actually use it without doing any sort of development. You can just drop it into a rich text area and it'll just work. Or you can also use the REST API to be able to implement your search results exactly how you want it to work. .NET Core. So this whole workshop was focused mainly on .NET Framework, which is what our sort of a lot of our customers are using right now. But that being said, we do have official .NET Core support. So if you are interested in learning how that works, it's pretty much identical to what we just did in .NET Framework. The only key difference is that there's no controller actions in the .NET Core. Instead, you use something called Vue Components, which is quite similar, just a different way of doing it. We have several GitHub repositories with some examples on how to get started with Agility.NET Core. So if you're starting a new project, you can consider whether you want to use .NET Core or not, and you can use that with us, or you can just use .NET Framework. Some other benefits that this does have is that this is just .NET Core stuff. Great things about it is that you can use it on any platform. So whether you're a Mac, Linux, Windows, it'll all just work. So you can have cross-platform development and even hosting. You can host your site on a Linux box if you want it. In addition to that, you don't have to use Visual Studio. Some people like it, some people don't. I personally am a huge fan of VS Code. It's just so much more lightweight, easy to use. And so when we work in .NET Core, you can use VS Code. You don't need to use Visual Studio. In addition, .NET Core support also introduces asynchronous module rendering. So in .NET Framework, when you have a bunch of modules on a page, it'll actually render each one by one. So if you have a lot of modules that take a lot of time to render, that can increase your page load time. But for .NET Core, all of those happen asynchronously, so your page load time is faster. So we have some, as I mentioned, we have some starter .NET Core templates. There's links to these for a vanilla starter site, also a React site. We also actually have a version of our new Agility website that we're developing in-house on .NET Core. There's some examples of how we've actually used React.js.net and .NET Core together, which is pretty cool. So if you're interested in using that, let me know. The other thing too is we actually, it says alpha, but our beta is just about ready to go. We have introducing a new way to work with Agility CMS. So up until now, we've been talking about the whole sync model. Being able to work in .NET. Now, this represents a problem for some people who maybe don't use .NET or want to access content in a non-.NET way. So we're introducing a content fetch API. So this is a REST-based API that's brand new by us, and we've put in a lot of different things in this. This will allow you to get sitemap pages and content via a high availability API, which is backed behind a CDN. So all of your requests that come in will be cached. It'll guarantee that you're getting your content as fast as possible. We're going to have tutorials and things for how to, set up Jamstack sites to be able to do static site generation using this API. Tutorials on how to use this in a React client site, Vue.js as well in the future. So we're really excited about that. We're going to be sharing that with the world, and very excited to build some more tutorials, and we'll have some more specific workshops targeted on that kind of way of building websites in the near future. So our beta right now is slated to go out early July, as well as a rebrand of our website. So some big changes coming here at Agility. I'm excited for the future. Also, we have content webhooks, which are on a roadmap as well. So whenever the state of any content changes, you'll be able to have an integration webhook so that you can build a custom application that can catch an event that says, hey, when this type of content is published, maybe take that content and automatically post it to social media. You can write logic like that. So you'll be able to do a lot of complex integrations, importing stuff, getting easier to get content out of Agility and integrate those with other services. So we're really trying to double down on our headless approach. We've always been headless, but now we're opening up our technology stack to be more platform agnostic. So you don't need to be a Windows developer. You don't need to be a .NET developer to use Agility. So you'll see a lot of those updates to Agility happening over the next few months. So in terms of learning more about Agility, there's a couple links in the slide, links to upcoming workshops. So we usually post a couple of months ahead of time for all of our workshops. This one, the Intro to Agility Development Training, we host this one at least once every 3 months. Sometimes lately it's been about once a month, depending on demand. So you can take a look and see what upcoming workshops we have planned. Check out our website for obviously more details about us, the blog as well. We also have a help site which has tons of tutorials and documentation on there. So if you're looking to do more with the sandbox that you currently have now, go there, and there's some additional sort of self-guided tutorial trainings through there. And then lastly, our GitHub page. So there's lots of examples of some things to do there, and I encourage you to check those out. So lastly, Q&A period. So if there's any questions or any burning questions or anything that you wanted to know about Agility that we didn't quite cover here, if there's any general questions or comments, I'd be happy to hear them now.
Is there do we ever do workshops where you go a deeper dive at more of an intermediate level?
Yes. So this one's just like the sort of basic intro. So what we do is we have several other ones. We plan them based on demand. This one's the most common one, just because there's a lot of people that want to sort of give Agility a try. But we have a more intermediate one, which focuses a little bit more on different ways of using linked content. We dive more into sort of more content architecture things. We also have a user-generated content workshop where we focus on how to build forums and work with data coming in from the website as opposed to just publishing content. And then we plan on doing some more as well, specifically around using the Content Fetch API in the near future. Yeah. Nina, did you have any questions or comments?
I actually just was wondering, because my computer was going behind in all the process and I really need to go over it again. So if I have a question or I have a setback or something, will you be accessible?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think I sent you an email today with the sandbox details. So feel free to reply to that and ask me any questions that you have. I'll also make sure that once we transcribe this recording, that I send that out to all attendees so you guys can review that, as well as links to the slides and everything too.
Awesome.
Yeah. Are there any questions you have for me right now, or you just want to go over things later?
I have to go over it again because I had an update with my Windows and then an update with Studio and then UK. So many things went on at the wrong time. So I have to.
Okay, well, that's good. I wasn't the only one then. I had some technical difficulties in the beginning too. Well, I mean, it happens, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Lauren, how about you? How are you doing?
Yeah, I did have one question that I don't think we really covered at all,
Sure,
which is how much support, if any, is there for sort of front-end users or security, like locking down certain pages, that sort of thing?
Support for users and locking down pages?
Yeah, so not users as in like editors or content managers, but like website users.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah. So let me show you something. There's a few different things you can do. Oops. Let me close that. So you'll notice that on pages here, where is it? Yeah, in the settings tab, you'll see that there's a checkbox here for secure page on website. So this, but by default, when you just press this button, it's not going to do anything. You need to enable some code to actually do something with it. But with that, you'll be able to mark a page as being secure on a website. And then what you would do is you would add code in your website that says, hey, if I'm trying to load a page and this value is set to true, then you can implement your own logic in terms of how to log in. To maybe you force a login page, maybe you redirect them somewhere else and then get them to come back. It's entirely up to you on how you want to do that. In terms of like logging users in and that kind of thing, we do have a concept of website users. So that's part of our user-generated content component. And this allows you to define different types of lists of profiles. And then there's APIs available via JavaScript or C# directly where you can interact with website users, such as log people in, initiate a password reset flow, get profiles, set password, create user, all that stuff. So you'd be able to integrate your secure page and website with website users optionally, or maybe if you're authenticating users from another system, you would implement that on your own.
Okay, thank you.
All right, cool. Any other questions? How you guys doing? Good?
Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, I mean, it is Friday afternoon, so why don't we call this a day? Thank you very much for taking the time to join. Yeah, really appreciate it. I would love to hear any feedback that you might have. And I'll be sending out an email to all attendees with recordings of the workshop. I'm not sure if I'll be able to send those out this afternoon. Sometimes it takes a bit of time to transcode that and send that out, but definitely by end of day Monday, you should see that.
Thank you very much, James.
All right, you're welcome.
Have a great weekend, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah, you too.